Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Dominaria United spoilers, and we got a big one today. We are inching towards the end of spoiler season. We get the full set Friday, but there's still a lot to reveal, and we have so many cards to talk about today. Some really exciting stuff, one of the sweetest 5-color legends of all time, a bunch of other stuff as well, which means we should probably jump right into it. Start talking sweet new Dominaria United cards. Before we do, a couple of quick reminders. Number one, to keep up on all the latest spoilers throughout the day, head over to MTGpreviews.com. Number two, if you need to pick up some Dominaria United cards, you can get them from our amazing sponsor Card Kingdom over at cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish. Anyway, let's talk Dominaria United. So first up today, we got a new Darien, King Darien the 48th. Not sure what happened to the other 47 Dariens. We got the original and now the 48th, so a lot has happened in between apparently that we don't know about, but this card's actually pretty good. It's a 3-drop Selesnya legendary human soldier. It's a 2/3. It says other creatures you control get +1/+1. You can pay 5, put a counter on it, make a 1/1 white soldier creature token, which as long as you have Darien's actually a 2/2, so a little better than it looks. And then you can sack it to give creature tokens you control hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So this is a callback obviously to the original Darien, which also cared about making soldier tokens, but they're very, very different cards. And I think that King Darien the 48th is actually way better than the original. If you think about what this card actually is, last time we were in Dominaria, Benalia Marshal, just a 3-drop with triple white in its mana cost that gives your other creatures +1/+1. That was kind of a staple of the format. That card saw a ton of play not that long ago, and King Darien is mostly an upgrade. The downgrade is it is legendary, so you can't stack them up, but in pretty much every other way, King Darien's just a better version of Benalia Marshal. And then you also get this Dauntless Escort ability, and it's been a while since Dauntless Escort was in Standard, but it was good back in its day, more than a decade ago. But the ability to sack your Darien to protect all your tokens can be very, very powerful. Your opponent goes to like Wrath your board in a token deck, you sack Darien, you keep your tokens, you kill your opponent on the backswing. So adding all this together, King Darien seems like the kind of card that should be able to see Standard play, and I think there's 3 potential homes for it. Number one is humans. So we're heading through rotation, but most of the good humans are sticking around because they're from Innistrad, and King Darien's in the perfect place on the curve for green-white humans. You got Catilda in the 2-drop slot, nice payoff for humans. You got Sigarda in the 4-drop slot. Darien comes down in between. It pumps your team. It does kind of exactly what you want it to do. It's like a pseudo-human lord. Plus, maybe you can go into Naya and take advantage of Baird, another new uncommon legend, which does synergize really well with King Darien. Baird, a 2-mana 2/2 legendary human soldier, says at the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with power greater than its base power, you make a 1/1 soldier creature token. Well, if you got Darien out, you're always going to have a creature with power greater than its base power because of its Anthem ability. So that means Baird is just giving you a 1/1, which is actually a 2/2 thanks to Darien every turn, and those are tokens to work with Darien's sacrifice ability. So I think some sort of like human-esh style deck in Standard could definitely use Darien. Another possibility is focus on the soldier theme. We got another busted lord today that we'll talk about later. If we get a good soldier lord in this set, then I think there's a real argument to maybe soldiers being even better than humans. Darien makes soldier tokens, Baird makes soldier tokens, so if we get some good ways of pumping soldiers, maybe soldier tribal is the way to go. The other plan is just to be a token style deck. Forget about the creature types and just go wide, because remember, King Darien the 48th pumps any creatures on the battlefield, so maybe we're playing like Naya, Jetmir, Ginny, Fae, Baird, Resolute Reinforcements, Sejano, and just trying to maximize that last ability on Darien, where we make a ton of tokens. If something goes wrong, we can sack Darien. Otherwise, it's pumping our tokens, allowing us to get in even more damage alongside Jetmir to help close out the game. So those are the homes I see for Darien. Outside of Standard, I don't think this card's really gonna make it. Like, we've talked about this throughout spoiler season, but once you get outside of Standard, and even in Standard, humans have a ton of really strong 3-drops. There is just a plethora of really very strong playable 3-drops in the human tribe, so I don't think it's gonna make it in like Pioneer humans, maybe in Modern humans. You're competing pretty directly with General Kudro of Drannith, which, as good as Darien is not as good as General Kudro, I don't think. General Kudro was just very, very powerful. Plus, you got a lot of other competition shenanigans. So I don't know, maybe like straight green, white, trying to be consistent, not going to other colors humans in older formats would play it. But really, I think this is mostly designed to be a standard card or something that you can jam in your commander decks. Like in a token commander deck, this offers a lot of value. I don't know if I'd want to play it as the leader of my commander deck. It's a little bit boring as the leader of my commander deck. But in the 99 of a token deck in commander, it offers a lot of value as an anthem and a way to protect your team. We also got a new legendary Faerie rogue in Ivy Gleeful Spellthief, and this card is near the top of my list of favorite cards from the set. I don't know if this is one of the most powerful cards in the set, but certainly one of the most unique. So 2 mana, Simic 2/1 Flying Faerie Rogue. It's a legend, and it says whenever a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy, you may copy that spell. The copy targets Ivy. A copy of an aura spell becomes a token. So this is just a super cool effect. In standard, what this means is, let's say you cast a Startle. Startle, not a very good card. It gives a creature -2/-0, but you also get a 2/2 black decay zombie, and you also draw a card. Let's say you have Ivy out and you cast Startle on another creature. The end result is going to be for 2 mana, you draw 2 cards, and you make 2 decay zombies. Or maybe you use Broker's Charm pseudo fight mode on one of your other creatures. You also can pseudo fight something with Ivy or Ancestral Anger to pump it and draw cards. So there's tons of shenanigans here where if you get this out alongside another creature, this kind of turns into a weird Panharmonicon for spells. You cast your spell, you get 1 copy, you get another copy targeting Ivy. Also works really well with enchantments. That's probably where this is most powerful. Using these spells is fine, but spells are temporary. They're giving you a bonus for only a short while. If you're using enchantments, these stick around. So you security bypass a non-Ivy creature, you get a copy on Ivy. You Sticky Fingers a non-Ivy creature, you get 1 in Ivy. So that's just a ridiculous amount of value. It's like Aura Panharmonicon on a 2-drop 2/1 flying body, which is mostly on curve. Also worth pointing out, this triggers whenever a player casts a spell that only targets a single creature. So if your opponent's playing pump spells or auras or anything like that, you can get a copy of them on your Ivy based on your opponent's thing. Also important to point out, it's a May ability. So if your opponent casts a Doomblade effect on a non-Ivy creature, your Ivy's not going to die. You just say no to that. So you only got to take the beneficial things. So those I think are the standard shenanigans. Once you get outside of standard, this seems like it could do some crazy things alongside Core Spirit Dancer, Sram, and some of the Orlozy, Bogglesy style decks. Like in Historic, it's cheap enough to work with Lurrus. The colors are a little bit awkward, but imagine getting on your Core Spirit Dancer and an Ivy, and then you cast an Angelic Gift on your Spirit Dancer, you get a copy on Ivy, you just draw a ridiculous amount of cards, you go off, you draw through your deck at lightning speed, so it seems really good there, but probably the sweetest thing to do with this card, and I honestly don't know how this is going to work under the rules, but it's Mutate. Mutate is ridiculous with Ivy. Mutate is the one mechanic that lets you target your creatures with other creatures. So let's say you have out a random creature in an Ivy, and then you Auspicious Sterix with Mutate. You're going to not only get the Auspicious Sterix on the creature you originally targeted, but you're going to get a token copy on Ivy as well, and then things just get really, really wild. You're going to have these token copies mixed into your Mutate pile, and all kinds of ridiculous things are going to happen. So I'm hyped to try to build Simic Mutate again in a format like Explorer and Historic, just because Ivy seems so ridiculous. The deck, it probably won't be super strong, but when it goes off, it's going to be spectacular. Also seems like maybe the best Mutate commander. Like if you want to build a Mutate commander deck, I think that Ivy's ability to double up your Mutate creatures might just make it the right choice. It would be better if it was in more colors, but still, Simic Mutate with Ivy seems super, super fun. You can also just go kind of boring Aura Spellslinger with Ivy as well. There's cards like Spellwild Ophi that make spells that target it cost 2 less to cast, and then you just have some super explosive turns where you're playing Ancestral Mask for 1 mana on your Ophi, but then you're also getting one on your Ivy and then your Ranker for trample, and your team is huge and deadly and killing your opponent. So Ivy Gleeful Spellthief, it just seems like a super fun card. I'm hyped to build around it in formats like Explorer and Modern, even though it probably isn't going to be super powerful, and it seems like an awesome leader for Mutate or a weird Auras deck in Commander. We also got Marina, Scholar of Antiquity. What's up, baby? Hey, bud. I'm making a video. A new Gruul Legendary Elf Artificer, 3 mana, 3/3, says tap an untap non-token artifact you control, add a green mana. So it turns your non-token artifacts into Llanowar Elves, essentially. And you can also tap 2 non-token artifacts you control to exile the top card of your library and play it this turn. So Meria is interesting for one big reason, and that is we don't have a Gruul artifact commander. Gruul is like the least supported color. Normally, green and red are the colors that hate on artifacts. You get the mass artifact removal, not support artifacts. artifacts. So that is the interesting twist. If you look on like EDH Rec, the most popular Gruul artifact commanders are like Antiquity combined with Torgo, Sevla, which isn't even really an artifact commander, it's more of a ramp commander. So we've just never really had a Gruul legend that really cared about artifacts. So if you want to take the challenge of building Gruul artifacts in Commander, Meria seems like the perfect way to go. Worth pointing out, I've seen some people be like, oh, does it really have to say non-tokens? The answer is yes. If this triggered with things like treasure tokens or clue tokens, which are just so easy to make, this would be an incredibly busted commander. Like if you could dockside and make a bunch of treasures and then just tap them all for mana and not have to sacrifice them, Meria would be so incredibly busted. So even though it does power down Meria to only work with non-tokens, I think that's a necessary evil with how easy it is to make token artifacts these days. Also worth mentioning, I think the best way to play Meria is going to be kind of like Urza. There's a few really miserable but very powerful artifacts that specifically care about being untapped. And think about the shenanigans Urza does. Part of the reason Urza is such a strong and kind of hated commander is because of how it synergizes with like Winter Orb. Winter Orb only lets players untap a single land, but it only works if Winter Orb is untapped. Same with like Static Orb. If Static Orb is untapped, players can't untap more than 2 permanents during their untap step, or Storage Matrix or Tyrannosphere. So the trick here is you slam your Winter Orb, you slam your Static Orb, you make your opponents not untap, and then on the end step before your turn, you just take and tap your artifacts, tap your Winter Orb, tap your Static Orb, all your stuff untaps. So this is going to be absolutely brutal. Like if you're trying to do Winter Orb shenanigans or Static Orb shenanigans and building these brutal stacks in Commander, Mira's probably actually just better than Urza because it's a mana cheaper. So turn 2 Winter Orb, turn 3 Meria, you probably just lock the table out of the game and win. You're not going to make any friends doing this, but you probably will win a lot of games over the weeping and gnashing of teeth of your opponents. Also, combos with Paradox Engine, although this is probably like a historic brawl thing, like if you make a bunch of mana rocks or non-token artifacts and you cast spells, you can tap them all and go infinite and draw a ton of cards. It works especially well with Paradox Engine because if you run out of action, then you can tap your artifacts to draw cards with the Exile ability, the second ability. So I don't know, we'll have to see. Maybe we can build this in like Modern or Pioneer, Historic, where Paradox Engine is legal. Worst case, this seems like a really easy way to combo off in your Historic Brawl deck with Meria. So Meria, I don't think this is really a standard card. In standard, I'm really in wait and see mode. Like, we know we're heading into artifact land. We know we're getting a ton of artifacts in Brothers War, in Phyrexia. If we get the right ones, maybe Meria has a shot in standard as well. But for now, I'm viewing this as a really unique commander and an interesting combo piece in some older formats. We also got our exclusive MTGGoldfish preview card, Balmor Battlemage Captain. So I just did an entire video about this card and wrote an article about it. I'll link it and put a card up if you want to watch that. So I'm not going to go super in depth on this one because I already covered it very in depth in those other videos. But Balmor's a 2-mana Izzet 1/3 bird wizard with flying. It says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain trample until end of turn. If you're playing some sort of Atlas Wizards deck, some sort of spell slinger go wide style deck, Balmor's very powerful. The mass pumping of your entire team allows you to do some really strong things where you just make a big board full of tokens or whatever, sling a few cheap spells, and next thing you know, all your creatures are massive in killing your opponent in one attack. And since it also grants trample, it means that you're going to be able to win even through blockers. So that's Balmor in 1 minute or less. Like I said, if you want the 10-minute version of Balmor, make sure to watch the spoiler video where I talk in depth about the card. We also got, oh my god, an absurd new 5-color legend, Jodah the Unifier. So 5 mana, legendary human wizard. It's a 5/5. It says legendary creatures you control get +X/+X, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control. So that includes Jodah. It doesn't say other legendary creatures. So Jodah by itself on an empty board is a 6/6 for 5. And then it says, whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a legendary non-land card with lesser mana value. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. The rest go on the bottom of your library in a random order. So Jodah is absolutely bonkers. We have old Jodah, which is sweet. It's a 5-color thing, lets you cast stuff at a discount. But move over Jodah Archmage Eternal. Jodah the Unifier, I think it's the new best 5-color commander. If you think about what this is, it's kind of a coat of arms for Legends, combined with, I guess, Heroes Podium, maybe more specifically for Legends. But then it's also like a Yidris, essentially, except you don't even have to hit your opponent. Like, if you just fill your deck with Legends, every Legend you cast is going to cascade. It's not once per turn. There's no restrictions. It's like this ridiculous legendary cascade, go off, cast all your stuff, do the most ridiculous things card. So I think that Jodah obviously is aimed at Commander, where it is going to be, I think, the best 5-color commander. Like, if you want to build a 5-color Legendary Matters deck, Jodah is exactly what you want. Right now, people play like Sisay Weatherlight Captain, which is good. Azeka with Chromatic Bridge on the backside, also kind of good. But none of that compares to the power of Jodah, which pumps your creatures, it builds a huge board, it cascade, it does everything that Commander players love. So I think if you want to build 5-color Legends Matters, this is the go-to now as your commander. And you get to do so many cool things. You just load your deck with every Legendary Matters card. You get Kethis for ramp, and you get Wrath for flashing stuff in. You can tutor stuff up with Captain Sisay. You can play your Azekas and your Sisays in the main deck, in the 99 of Jodah, and it's going to be a blast. And it's also important to note that last ability. It says when you cast a legendary spell from your hand, not a legendary creature spell. So that means you can also go legendary sorceries. Like if you Urza's Ruinous Blast, or Primeval's Glorious Rebirth, or Kamal's Druidic Vow, you're going to cascade into a legend. If you cast a Planeswalker, you could go Jodah Super Friends. Obviously, the creature pumping, legendary pumping isn't going to be as good, but you could just play a bunch of Planeswalkers and cascade into more, because Planeswalkers are legends. You got legendary artifacts like Blackblade Reforged and Heroes Podium. You got legendary enchantments like Search for Iskana. All of these things are going to trigger in Cascade. So basically, you play Jodah and you cast what's in your deck and everything doubles up and you just go off and take over the game. Maybe even more exciting for me, though, is I really want to try to build around this in Standard. I don't know if it's going to be good, but it seems so fun. We have a decent amount of Legendary Matters support. We got Plaza of Heroes, along with Triumphs to make the mana work. We got Rocket Robic, one of my favorite cards from the set, to take advantage of our Legends dying, and now we just have a ton of powerful Legends. Like, if we can make the mana work and play Jodah, we can cast a Jet Mirror and get Rafine for free and just, like, have so many busted cards. There's so many Legends in our current Standard that are just strong standalone cards that I think the plan could actually work. And if we got a problem with the pesky Legend roll, we even got Mirror Box in Standard to grow our Legends and to get around the Legend roll. Imagine having multiple Jodahs on the battlefield. Every Legend you cast is going to double cascade. Everything's going to get so huge so quickly. So Jodah the Unifier, designed to be a Commander All-Star. I think that is the goal of this card, is to be a great Legendary Matters card. In Commander, the best leader for Legendary Matter 5-color deck, but I think it's actually going to be super fun to play in Standard. We'll see if Legends are good enough to get there in Standard. Can we make the mana work? Is it going to be powerful enough? I don't know, but I'm certainly going to try because this card is so cool. We also got the second member of the mono-colored Lord Cycle from the set. We talked about the Goblin one a couple days ago, and it was really good. And our Merfolk version is equally strong. Vodalian Hexcatcher. 2-mana 1/1 with Flash. It's a Merfolk wizard. It says other Merfolk you control get +1/+1, and you can sack a Merfolk to counter a non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1. This is the best Merfolk Lord we've gotten in quite a while. So Merfolk are kind of synonymous with Lords. If you look at modern Merfolk, Legacy Merfolk, whatever, they're built around Lord of Atlantis, Master of the Pearl Triton, these 2-mana Lords. I don't think Hexcatcher is quite as good as those, because part of the gimmick of Merfolk is you try to give your opponent an island, maybe using a Spreading Seas style effect or whatever, and then you just have this huge unblockable team and win the game. So you're not dropping your Lord of Atlantises for Hexcatcher, although once you get past the 2 Island Walk Lords, I think the Hexcatcher might be the next one up. It's definitely better than Merfolk Mistbinder. Mirror Regery is really strong because of its untap ability. You can do some explosive things, but it is 3 mana, so I think maybe Hexcatcher beats that out as well. So I think this is just a new staple in Merfolk across formats, and then you also get this Curse Catcher ability. We've seen Curse Catcher be really good in Merfolk, because how do you lose with Merfolk? It's your opponent having a sweeper. It's one of the easiest ways. Your opponent Wrath of Gods, they settle the wreckage. Wrath away on your Merfolk, you can't rebuild. Well, turning all of your Merfolk into Curse Catchers, where you can sacrifice a Merfolk to maybe counter, or at least like Mana Tithe and slow down a Wrath, is a huge, huge deal. That buys you a little bit of extra time to fight through the disruption and be able to close out the game with your creatures. So it's a very relevant ability as well. And Flash lets you cast it by surprise. So your opponent is not necessarily going to see this coming. It also allows for some sweet combat shenanigans where you attack with your team. Your opponent's like, all right, you don't quite have lethal, so I'll take it. And then you flash this in during combat to pump your team and get lethal and win the game. So just very, very good. So in Standard, this card basically does nothing. As of right now, these are the only merfolk that will be in standard after rotation. Hexcatcher is good. Mindsinger can be good. The rest of them are pretty much draft chaff. They don't really do anything with merfolk. They're more about like Spellslinger or whatever. So you can't really build a functional merfolk deck in standard after rotation. But remember, a year from now, next fall, we're going to be heading back to Ixalan, and one of the big gimmicks of Ixalan is merfolk. That's one of the big supported tribes. So even though I don't think we're going to be catching hexes in standard in the immediate future, I would not be at all surprised if a year from now, when we get to our next iteration of standard, which will still have Dominaria United, if this is actually a really important card. This feels like a plant for the future once we go back to Ixalan. In the meantime, staple in Pioneer / Historic / Explore merfolk, played alongside Mistbinder, played alongside Kumana. Merfolk is actually like oddly popular on Arena because Wizards gave away a lot of the cards in intro decks. So you run into Merfolk more than you probably should, but this is a huge upgrade. Like if you're someone who plays Merfolk on Arena, this is slotting into your deck. It's going to be great. And then as we talked about before, I think this is the third best lord for modern Merfolk. And I think you play it every single time. So I think the core of your traditional beatdown Merfolk, not the like only a handful of creature control Merfolk deck that we've seen a little bit, but the traditional flood the board, pump it with Lord Merfolk deck is going to be Hexcatcher, Lord of Atlantis, Master of Pearl, Trident, and Sevulin. Add those together, and that's a really, really strong package with Ether Vial and the rest of the stuff you get in the Merfolk deck. So Hexcatcher, blown away. I was skeptical when Wizards said, oh, we're going to print a cycle of monocolored lords. I was thinking, okay, like sure, they're going to be 5 mana, they're going to be 4 mana, they're going to suck. But really, Wizards has absolutely shocked me with the power of these lords. These are old school lords. These are powerful lords. Wizards has really, really pulled back on these designs recently and made a lot of just like really not very strong lords that aren't really playable in standard or modern or pioneer formats like that. But that has changed with Dominaria. They're going back to the early years when you were lords used to be really powerful, and Hexcatcher is certainly on that list. We also got a new land, kind of a weird new land, in Thran Portal. So it's a gate. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands, so basically a fast land. When it enters the battlefield, choose a basic land type. It is that type in addition to its other types, but mana abilities on Thran Portal cost an additional 1 life to activate. So essentially, you play this, you choose a color, the Thran Portal is going to become a basic land of that color, except it's going to ping you whenever you tap it for mana. So this is a fast land that kind of works like a Temple of the Dragon Queen, with a huge upside that you get the basic land type. So the basic land type is really the calling card, I think, of this gate. It's going to help support Domain in Standard. I think that's the main goal. You have this alongside the Triomes. Going to make it possible to turn on your Sphinx to the Clear Skies, or Herd Migration, or pump up your Gaia's Might. So I think that's the goal of this card. So I do think this is pretty good in Standard, especially if you're trying to be a Domain deck, a 5-color style deck. It's going to be a powerful option. Outside of Standard, I think its main deal is it's a gate. I think you play this in the gate deck, and I think it'll be very good in the gate deck, because the biggest struggle for gates is so many of the gates come into play tapped. And that's just a big drawback. If you are trying to win with Maze's End, or pump up your Gatebreaker Ram, or reduce the cost on Gate Colossus, your mana base has to be almost all gates. You can afford very few non-gate lands, but then if you're playing a tap land every single turn, sometimes you're just too slow and you get run over. So Thran Portal, the ability to come into play untapped on the first couple turns of the game, that is a relevant upside. Maybe it lets you cast a Growth Spiral or something on turn 2. Although there is a drawback here, that 1 damage you're taking every turn really means outside of Standard Domain and outside of gate stacks, it's just not a playable card. At first I was like, okay, it comes into play tapped early. It can be any color. Maybe some like combo deck, 5-color combo deck in Modern can play this. But really, unless you're somehow 5-color combo that also cares about Domain, I don't really see why you would ever play this over Mana Confluence or City of Brass, which is always coming to play untapped. Always make any color that you want, and you're still taking the same amount of damage for tapping them. So I don't think this has really any meaningful potential outside of the Domain or Gate scenario. Also good for 9 Fingers in Commander. 9 Fingers was weird when it was printed because it's a Gate Commander but only in 3 colors, which leaves you a bit light on gates because of color identity rules. But Thran Portal, another way to up your gate count in 9 Fingers. So Thran Portal, I like it for Standard. I like it for gates, which is one of my pet archetypes. I think it's going to be very good there. Otherwise, probably not quite good enough to see much play. Speaking of lords, we also got our elf lord, and it too is a good one. Leaf Crown Visionary. So double green 1/1 elf druid says other elves you control get +1/+1, and whenever you cast an elf spell, you can pay 1. If you do, you draw a card. So this is just another super duper strong lord. Not only is it pumping your team, but it's generating card advantage. In that last ability, I know it costs a mana, but that works so well with elves, because elves are all about making a ton of mana. So it's kind of reminiscent of like Glimpse of Nature, Beast Whisper. Of course, the drawback is you do got to spend that mana. That is a downside. Not going to be as easy to go fully infinite as it is with something like Glimpse of Nature, but I think that's still fine. As a backup, it's going to be a fine source of card advantage. Plus, you're getting an on-curve lord to go with it. And as I mentioned before, the reason to be hyped about this is elves are just really good at making mana. You got like Heritage Druid Nettle Sentinel, which can make a ridiculous amount of mana if you get multiple Nettle Sentinels going. You got a ton of mana dorks, Llanowar Elves, Elvish Mystic, you got Elvish Archdruid that can make ridiculous amounts of mana. So even though the ability is expensive, if there's any tribe that can support it, it's going to be the elf tribe, because you just have so many things to tap for mana. So I think this card is really, really good for elves in older formats. I also think, unlike Merfolk, there are technically enough elves in standard to build like a Naya elf deck. I don't know how strong it's going to be. It looks a little bit clunky. You're missing like the 1 mana dorks, but it is something you can do, and Leaf Crown Visionary would be good in it. But I think this is especially going to shine in elf decks in formats like Historic, in Pioneer, back in Modern, probably show up a little bit in Legacy, maybe like a 1 of Green Sun Zenith target, in Commander Elves. So this is just an elf all-star. All these lords are super, super good. There's not much else to say about it. If you're playing elves, play Leaf Crown Visionary, and you're going to be very happy with it. We also got an interesting white legend in Danitha, Benalia's Hope. So 5 mana 4/4 first strike vigilance lifelink. So kind of like ground Baneslayer almost. And then it has an ability where when it enters the battlefield, you can put an aura or equipment card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield attached to it. So Danitha, we'll see how good this is in standard. 5 mana 4/4, not super exciting, but this does seem really strong against aggro. Like the combination of first strike vigilance and lifelink means if you just slam this against like mono red, I don't know how you're gonna lose. Like it pretty much beats mono red by itself. As far as its actual ability, there's not a ton to do with it in standard yet. This is another card that feels kind of like a plant for the future. Again, we know we're going to Artifact World, in Brothers War, in Phyrexia, so there'll probably be something sweet to do with it in the future. Right now, I think the best thing you do is like put a Cloudsteel Kieran on it from your hand or graveyard and build your own weird Platinum Angel. You get around the expensive reconfigure cost of Cloudsteel Kieran. In older formats, I mean, I guess you can like play this and equip a Colossus Hammer for free or put a Calder Complete on it to get in for some hasty damage. That seems sweet, but at 5 mana, it's hard for me to imagine this really taking off in a format like Modern or even in Pioneer. In Commander, there's kind of some spicy things you could do with this card. Maybe the best is Danitha, put a Helm of the Host on it, so then you'll get a hasty copy of it when you go to combat, and then put like a Eldrazi Conscription or something on the hasty copy and start annihilating people. That seems pretty strong. It's kind of like Godo that doesn't actually go infinite, but still does some powerful things. There's also just the possibility of just slamming a lot of big artifacts or auras on it. Like Danitha, put Mantle of the Ancients on it, maybe in some sort of self-mill deck, and then reanimate all your auras and equipments and just make the biggest Voltron threat ever, or just like putting an Argentum Armor or a World Slayer on it to cheat on the equip cost is pretty good. Can also go infinite with it. The easiest way to go infinite, I think, in Commander is Gift of Immortality. Gift of Immortality, 3 mana aura. When enchanted creature dies, return to the battlefield, and then in your end step, you return Gift of Immortality. But the trick here is, let's say you play Danitha, you put the Gift of Immortality from your hand or graveyard onto it for free, then if you sack Danitha, maybe to Ashnod's Altar, Phyrexian Altar for infinite mana, or to Altar of Dementia for infinite mill, the Danitha is going to die, but then Gift of Immortality is going to put Danitha right back into play, and then when Danitha comes into play, you put the Gift of Immortality back on it, and then you sacrifice it again, and again, and again, and this all works pretty easily in a mono-white commander deck with one of the pieces starting in your command zone. So powerful is a combo commander as well. So Danitha, The lifelink and first strike and vigilant ability make me wonder if this could at least see some sideboard play in standard, even though its ability doesn't seem super strong at the moment, although probably better in the future once we get more artifacts and maybe more auras. Commander, combo potential, and maybe some jank potential in a format like Pioneer, even though I think 5 mana is a little too much. We also got some new card draw in Silver Scrutiny. So double blue and X sorcery, draw X cards, although you can cast it as though it had flash, so at instant speed if X is 3 or less. So if you think about Silver Scrutiny, what it really is a Mind Spring, which Mind Spring isn't really good enough anymore. You don't even usually play Mind Spring in Commander anymore because there's so many options, but you get some upside here, where if you cast it for 3 mana, you get a pop quiz without the learning. If you cast it for 4 mana, you get an inspiration. If you cast it for 5 mana, you get a Jace's Ingenuity. Being able to cast it as an instant, very, very powerful at those lower mana values. The problem is, pop quiz, inspiration, Jace's Ingenuity, none of those are especially playable anymore. Although I think these examples don't really do Silver Scrutiny justice, because we have seen similar cards with upside see play, like the 4 mana instant speed draw 2. If you have an upside like Glimmer of Genius or Hieroglyphic Illumination, those cards have seen play. Or if you have an upside at 5 mana draw 3 at instant speed, like Precognitive Perception or Gravenlore, those cards aren't staples, but they've seen a little bit of play. And the upside of Silver Scrutiny is, in the late game, if you get in this, grindy attrition battle, and you top deck it and you're empty-handed, well, you can just tap out and spend your entire turn to refill your hand as a Mind Spring. So I think that Silver Scrutiny probably has a chance to see a bit of play, even though it isn't especially efficient or strong at any point on the curve. Its flexibility makes up for that and gives it a chance. We also got a new Black Wrath in Drag to the Bottom. So 4 mana black sorcery, domain, each creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is 1 plus the number of basic land types among lands you control. So if you have all 5 basic land types, everything gets -6. If you're a little short, it's less than that, but still, this feels like a pretty solid wrath. It's kind of like Mutilate, but for domain rather than mono black decks. So you can even compare it to Damnation. It doesn't necessarily get rid of everything, but still, most of the time, this is going to get rid of all the threats on the battlefield, assuming that you can get max domain. And remember, in Standard, we got the Triomes from Streets of New Capenna, and I think there's going to be a legit strategy of maybe you're playing mono black, but you're playing a Xander's Lounge, or maybe you're playing a Rafine's Tower, a Zatora's Proving Ground, some of these off-color Triomes, just to up your basic land count, and then Drag to the Bottom is really good. Black doesn't get 4 mana Wraths very often, and in Standard, if you can actually have max domain, -6 to everything is pretty much going to be a hard Wrath that sweeps away the entire board. There's also some potential to manipulate this. Maybe you're playing like a Niv deck or with Territorial Kavus. What you can try to do is get the right amount of basic land types that you can Wrath away all your opponent's stuff, but maybe your Niv survives, and maybe your Territorial Kavu survives, so you can turn this into like a weird pseudo plague win in the right scenario, in the right deck, which makes it even more powerful. So I think that Drag to the Bottom definitely has a lot of Standard potential, maybe some Pioneer and Modern potential in domain style decks. In Commander, it's tough. If you're getting max domain in Commander, you gotta be 5 colors, which means you can be playing Damnation, Wrath of God, Toxic Deluge, name a Wrath, Blasphemous Act. If you're 5 colors, you have so many options that even if you're a 5-color domain deck, outside of just flavor purposes, I don't think this is gonna beat out the other options. But in 60 card formats, this is actually a pretty competitive costed and very exciting Wrath in those domain style decks. We also got a pretty ridiculous white removal spell in Leyline Binding. So 6 mana enchantment with flash. When ETBs, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield. Most importantly, domain, it costs 1 less to cast for each basic land type among lands you control. What this means is, if you have full domain, all the basic land types, this is 1 mana instant speed, exile any of your opponent's non-land permanents. That is ridiculous. Yes, it's an enchantment, so it can get killed and the thing will come back into play, but still, this can be so efficient in a deck that's built around actually hitting domain. If you think about past versions of this card, kind of the baseline is Oblivion Ring, which is 3 mana sorcery speed, do the same thing essentially. So if you have 3 basic land types, so a 3-color deck, this is essentially going to be an Oblivion Ring with the upside of being instant speed. You can flash it into play. 3 basic land types is a single Triumph. If you have any Triumph on the battlefield, that's going to give you an Oblivion Ring. And it's even better than that. When you consider that Cast Out, a flash version of Oblivion Ring, is 4 mana, that means you only need 2 basic land types, and you're getting a Cast Out, which sure, Cast Out can cycle, but still. And then if you max this out, this is the enchantment version of Swords to Plowshares, except it hits any non-land permanent and your opponent's not going to gain life, which is bonkers. And that's only 2 Triumphs. We consistently see decks in formats like Modern that can have full domain on turn 2. It is not that hard to pull off when you have things like Triumphs in the format. So to me, this looks like a new staple removal spell. My only concern is there are a lot of ways to blow this up in Standard. It can get void rended. People play Outland Liberator. Boseiju is pretty heavily played. So this isn't guaranteed. It's not get rid of that thing forever. It's going to get rid of it for a while, but in some matchups, your opponent's going to be able to kill it and get it back, which is a drawback. But its efficiency, I think, makes up for that downside. I'm also interested in this card in older formats. If you look at Modern, we've seen like Prismatic Ending revolutionize the format. March of Otherworldly Light also sees a ton of play. These are flexible removal spells that can get rid of any non-land permanent more or less, but Leyline Binding has some upsides here. If you can hit all the land types, which in Modern, a fetch land Triome Shockland format is incredibly easy to do. This is going to be cheaper than all these other options, which is nice. And then one of the upsides of this card in Modern is it's actually kind of expensive, which makes it hard to kill. Like, you cannot Prismatic Ending away a Leyline Binding. You just can't converge for enough mana. March of Otherworldly Light, you can technically get rid of it, but it's going to take a lot of mana to actually do it. So almost like you see creatures that are expensive and have a reduced cost end up being really good against like Fatal Push, because yeah, you're casting them for 1 mana or 2 mana, but Fatal Push can't kill them because their mana value is technically much higher than that. I feel like Leyline Binding kind of does the same thing in Modern. So I think that Leyline Binding, Standard, probably going to be very, very good. At a minimum in the Domain deck, and possibly in other decks as well. And I think this has a shot in Modern. I think it has a shot maybe in like Niv decks in Pioneer or Explorer. It is just an incredibly efficient card, assuming that you can get those basic land types going to reduce the cost. We also got the return of Tatyova. Tatyova, Steward of the Tides. So 3 mana, 3/3. It's a legendary Merfolk Druid. Land creatures you control have flying. And then whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if you have 7 or more lands, up to 1 target land you control becomes a 3/3 elemental creature with haste, and it'll have flying if you have Tatyova, and it's still a land. And that effect does not go away until end of turn. So if you can do a bunch of ramping and get a bunch of lands going, Tatyova is just going to make 3/3s every turn, potentially multiples, and kill people really quickly. It's kind of like, honestly, Field of the Dead on a body. The downside is you're actually turning your lands into creatures. So if your opponent can kill your 3/3s, you're not only losing the creature, but you're losing a land. But still, Field of the Dead is like a busted card that has been banned in multiple formats. So even kind of calling back to that is worth taking note of. And this is a card that just works really well with what green decks do in a format like Commander. We've seen this with Tatyova Benthic Druid, which has become one of the more popular Simic commanders. If you look at Simic decks or green decks in general, they're all just about ramping lands on the battlefield. Cultivate, Kadama's Reach, Nature's War, 3 Visits. Those are the cards you're playing anyway. And then you have something like either of the Tatyovas on the battlefield, and you're just getting extra value. Cultivate, you're drawing cards with Tatyova Benthic Druid. Now you have Tatyova's Steward of Tides, which in the late game is going to take and just give you a ton of threats to close out the game. If you want to go really deep, you can like Scape Shift, get a bunch of lands into play, Scape Shift, have a ton of lands come into play, turn them all into hasty creatures, kind of get this weird Valakut Scape Shift style kill. Plus, it turns other land creatures into flyers as well. And I don't know if you're really going to try to build around that, but you can use other cards to animate your lands. Use a Nissa or something to animate a land, give the creature flying. So Tatyova seems like a pretty sweet uncommon build around. I don't know if it's quite as busted as the initial Tatyova. I think the initial one, because of the card draw, is just, oh, that card is so strong. But this Tatyova slots nicely into many Simic decks in Commander, especially old Tatyova decks, and it'll be very, very powerful there. We also got a new Rakdos legend, Rivaz of the Claw. So a 3-mana 3/3 legendary Vishino Warlock. It has Menace. You can tap it to make 2 mana of any combination of colors, but only spend that mana on dragon creatures. And then once each turn, you can cast a dragon creature spell from your graveyard. And when you do that, the dragon's gonna gain. If it dies, it goes to exile instead. So Rivaz of the Claw, actually kind of an interesting card. It's a ramp ability is similar to like Sarkhan Fireblooded. Making 2 mana is kind of huge. You pay this on turn 3. When you untap on turn 4, you make your land drop, you can be casting a 6-drop dragon, same as Sarkhan Fireblooded, and then you kind of get this weird Chainer Nightmare adaptability where you can cast a dragon from your graveyard each turn. So this feels like a huge upgrade for dragon decks. In Commander in specific, I think this might actually be in the conversation for best Rakdos Dragon Commander. Oddly, Rakdos Dragons is just not a super supported color. If you look at red-black dragon legends, it's basically Bladewing and then a couple of Kolagans, which they're fine, they're decent cards, but they're not like super exciting. Rivaz, I think, is on par with those. It's much cheaper, it ramps you into your dragons. Only drawback is it isn't a dragon itself, but it's certainly designed to lead a dragon deck. So if you want to try Rakdos Dragons, I think this is a really sweet option for it. In Standard, I don't know if this card's really going to do a ton, but it can lead to explosive starts. Like if you can run this out on 3, this means you're untapping and playing Zatora on turn 4, a Junji, a Carry on turn 4, and that's a lot of value. That is a huge dragon body on the battlefield really early in the game. So we'll see if we got enough dragons to really make it work. Unfortunately for Rivaz, Adventures in the Forgotten Realms rotating, so all the dragon supports there in Tiamat and so forth are not going to be in Standard, which might minimize its power, but those cards still exist in older formats. If you want to do like Tiamat dragons in Pioneer or Explorer Modern, this is a great way to ramp into your dragons. Or maybe Niv Mizzet Reborn, this ramps you into your Niv and it's a 2-color card for your Niv and then even lets you cast your Niv from the graveyard. Is that going to be enough? If its ramp worked for other things, it would be busted. That's only downside in a Niv deck is Niv isn't really a dragon deck in a format like Modern or a format like Pioneer. So you're not really ramping into anything other than Niv. So maybe this is too narrow, but I mean a 3-mana 3/3 Menace isn't the end of the world. And then if you're playing Commander, I think you just play this in any dragon deck. It does exactly what you want. It ramps into your dragons, which is huge, and then it gives you this weird way to recur your dragons, which is also really powerful. So I think any 5-color Ur-Dragon pile, whatever, it's going to be great, but it works especially well with one dragon commander, which is Scion of the Ur-Dragon. Scion of the Ur-Dragon, 5-color 4/4 flyer, and it says pay to search your library for a dragon card, put it in your graveyard. If you do, Scion of the Ur-Dragon becomes a copy of that card until end of turn, and then shuffle your library. Well, if you have both of these cards going, it gets really sweet because you can Scion of the Ur-Dragon to tutor up a dragon, turn your Scion into a copy of it, and then Rivaz will let you cast whatever dragon you just tutor up and put in your graveyard with your ability to cast dragons from your graveyard once each turn. So I think at a minimum, this is going to be one of the best cards in Scion of the Ur-Dragon and Commander. Seems like a huge upgrade there. So Rivaz, I don't know how much this will actually do in 60-card formats. It seems more like a fun meme build around for against the odds or something in 60-card formats, but in Commander in specific, sweet Rakdos Dragon Commander and great upgrade to 5-color dragons in the 99, ramping you, recurring your dragons is exactly what you're looking for in the 99 of a deck like Scion of the Ur-Dragon. In the realm of lower rarity cards, we got a pretty interesting Orzhov legend, Elas, il-Kor Sadistic Pilgrim, a white and a black for a 2/2 legendary Phyrexian Core Cleric. Has Death Touch, says whenever another creature enters a battlefield under your control, you gain a life. Whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life. So this is a twist on a Blood Artist or Zulaport Cutthroat or Cruel Celebrant, with the upside that you can play it as your commander, which is an upside for Commander in specific, although it's a pretty big drawback for other formats, because a lot of Aristocrats decks, you really want to stack up multiple Blood Artists or Zulaport Cutthroats, and that's going to be hard to do with Elas, just because it's legendary and you're going to legend row yourself. So I kind of wish this one wasn't legendary, although being a legend does make it into a kind of interesting combo commander, where if you can have like a Gravecrawler loop or some sort of Reveler Karmic Guide loop or Enduring Renewal Hangerback Walker so it dies and you keep casting it loop, it is a way that you just kill the table. You gain infinite life, you infinitely drain your opponents, so there are ways that this can be a good infinite combo commander, although as someone who likes 60-card formats, I am a little sad that my Blood Artist effect in this set is going to be legendary. Of course, also good in Soul Sisters. I expect we'll be seeing this a lot on Magic Arena because people just love their life gain decks on Arena. And this is kind of a nice little Soul Warden style effect that's going to gain you life, and then it gives you some protection. If your opponent wrasts your board, well, at least you get to drain them a bunch on the way out. So Elas, awkward that it's a legend, but a pretty powerful Blood Artist effect nonetheless. We also got Asunder, an interesting new naturalize, essentially 2-mana instant, exile target artifact or enchantment, but it has kicker of 1 and a black. If it's kicked, you get to exile target non-land permanent. So this is naturalize the exiles, which exiling is an upside, especially in Commander where there's so much recursion. Also gets around indestructibility, which is relevant against some artifacts and enchantments, and then it upgrades into like a mortality spear. If you can kick it for 4 mana, you get to get rid of any non-land permanent and you exile it. It'll be interesting to see just how good this card ends up being. Exiling is an upside, but once you think about like modern or formats like that, is this actually going to be better than just playing an Assassin's Trophy or Abrupt Decay or splashing a Prismatic Ending or a March of Otherworldly Light? If you want to get rid of a non-artifact or enchantment like a Planeswalker or a creature or something, you do have to spend 4 mana, which is a high amount, and Naturalize isn't the strongest starting point anymore. You don't see too many literal Naturalizes in the sideboard, so we'll have to wait and see. I think the card's interesting if you're in Golgarian Commander. I think it's in consideration because exiling is an upside, although that kicker cost actually does kind of minimize its impact on Commander just because you got to be Golgari plus rather than playing it in any deck that has green because of color identity concerns. But still, because it exiles and because of kicker, this is a card that has potential to be pretty good, at least in Commander. Finally today, in the realm of lower rarity cards, a couple of interesting reprints. Negate, good to have it in Standard, should just always be in Standard. Phyrexian Rager was kind of a thing a million years ago in Standard. It was an actual playable card as a 3-mana 2/2 the ETB draw card, lose a life. We have so many value cards today, not sure it holds up in Standard anymore. Its body just isn't really that big, but we'll have to wait and see. Worst case, it should be good in Limited. We also got a few more lower rarity legends. I mean, some of it we've talked about before, like Baird could see a bit of Standard play. The rest of them, a little bit too expensive, but they do seem fun to build around at the minimum. As far as Draft Shaft, we got some stuff that isn't bad. I still think the commons and uncommons in this set are just super cool. Like Phyrexian Missionary, lifelink, and a nice grindy ability could be good. Elvish Hydromaster seems fun in draft, at least making a token copy of your things. Some removal, some reanimation, not a ton of stuff that I expect to really take off in 60 card formats, but stuff that'll certainly have an impact unlimited at a minimum. And that brings us to the end of our daily Dominaria United spoilers for today. So let me know what you think. What are you most hyped for? What card are you going to be building around? Where are you going to be building it? Standard, Modern, Commander? Let me know what you're thinking in the comments, everyone. Again, check out our exclusive spoiler video. Thanks again to Wizards for hooking us up with a card. And thanks to all you for watching. So that's our spoiler video for today. I'll be back tomorrow with more Dominaria United spoilers. Until then, have a great day, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.